I kind of feel like we've been shoehorned in a little bit. And you're gonna have to make the links and connections for yourselves at some point. But Shoshi, do you want to kick us off?
Oh yeah, hello, it's wonderful to see so many of you here. This is our first presentation on this project that we're doing. We're also working on publications around it. So if we're rushing through things a bit, feel free to chat to us afterwards. This is a almost a lightning talk of quite a big topic. Two of us are in the room, but to give credit where it's due, we were enormously facilitated in this by some student collaborators as well. Ophelia Labby, who was actually a student intern through the Centre for Advanced Education, and Navi Jeswal from UCL, who was just a connection, but has been absolutely phenomenal in the support that she's given us and is continuing to give us, both of them in shaping the research. So click along. So this project comes from our day jobs, which is working to support AI capacity building, educators using AI for education within two very large research-intensive London-based universities. We're talking RISE because it's got a huge online component, and the stuff we're talking about is not limited to in-person education, even though that's a huge amount of what we also work on. We did focus on our universities because that's where most of our data collection comes from, but not entirely. We did broaden out a bit. So the background, as I'm sure you're all aware, huge amounts of and very, very rapid developments in AI has caused opportunities and disruption and challenges to academia as an entire discipline, entire field. Universities are responding as fast as they can, which, as we know, can feel very slow, because universities are big and are complex, and they're not institutions that can just kind of pivot on a dime. There are huge amounts of processes and cultures and practices, and we've been hearing before about an entire tradition behind how different disciplines behave, which is a big part of this picture. But we came into this being very aware of certain things that universities are doing, that we're doing in our institutions, other institutions are doing. I've listed a few of them up on the screen. We're not going to be talking, by the way, very much about the tech. We'll talk a little bit about the tech, but this is more about kind of the concepts of how do people feel about it, how are people using it, how is it being adopted. And then just to link this to the topic of RISE and the session, we're talking about inclusion. Artificial intelligence in education is one of the 4 Sustainable Development Goals from UNESCO. This is about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality of education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. I would say, from my personal experience, I start with the educators in that, which is that it is also, for lifelong learning, is also the educators in the institution who are on that AI journey as much as it is the learners. And so that was kind of our focus group within this project. I'm talking quickly because I want us to get on to the exciting part, which is the findings and the research. But just another piece of background. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny snapshot of the number of frameworks that have recently been published, and are currently being published, are currently being produced around use of AI in education. So whilst I say universities might move slowly, this is a really, really dynamic field. And as I said, I couldn't put them on the slide, but just some really key ones. The UNESCO frameworks are often the foundation texts for a lot of these other ones that are going on there. We also have Martin himself has been involved in the framework for responsible AI in education. At my institution, Queen Mary University of London, Xue Zhao and Lillian Schofield have got a framework which we're now implementing into our training processes. There is a AI competency framework for higher education, which is in the process of being developed largely at UCL. And then, of course, Cara Kennedy's work as well has been kind of useful to both of us. So that's just a snapshot. One of the things that Ophelia has been so helpful at doing has been looking through, though she was looking through this a couple of months ago, so it's already, might not be entirely in date, looking through, oh sorry, I haven't got slides, and just kind of summarising what's the common theoretical and almost policy position, given that very few institutions have policies yet around AI, frameworks and guidance are where universities are going for that kind of consistency. And almost the security, that's what guidance is to give you security. And that's what frameworks do. They give you that boundaries that you know that you're going in the right direction. And that's important context for what I'm about to talk about. So theoretically, kind of what informed our thinking around evaluating AI capacity building initiatives is, well, how do you know they've succeeded? And what are the factors that go inside there? So drawing on two frameworks here. One of them is Davies' technology acceptance model, of which I'm a massive fan. What the key part for me of the Davies model, and I know that you can go down, there are many adaptations of this which go into more detail, but the key parts of this is this bit here. Perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use are two key determinants into intention to use. And intention to use is a key determinant into actual use. So when you're looking at building capacity, building confidence, building the use of a new technology, you do have to start with the effective domain. How do people feel about it? Because, well, it's really hard to force people. I have a 2-year-old. It's really hard to force people to do things they don't want to do. And it's even harder to get them to do it well if they don't want to do it. So we have to, it has to cover this sense of the perception of AI. And that was a really big part of this. How do people feel about the capacity building that's going on? And that is surrounding them, all of those innovations. The other thing is looking at theory of change and program theories. This doesn't go against what I just said, it's just the flip side of it. Impact should be measurable in some way. Now we're talking about impact, which is qualitative here with what we were looking at, but we're still really looking at, okay, what can we track? What can we measure? In this. Here I was saying short-term impact, because this is something which I do when I'm looking at theory of change, is what are the short-term measures. The short-term impact I would say is largely around this area. For me, we're looking at what are people's attitudes in the short term. If we can start to understand that, start to understand how they feel, then that will give us some good indicators of how they might behave, especially given all that context I gave you around the frameworks where ethical use, for example, is a key part of this. Are we ticking those boxes? And just very, very quickly, I'm going to hand over to Martin soon to talk about the results part of it. Data collection, we disseminated surveys out to 3 different channels. Staff at our home institutions, that was 2. And then there's also put out, kind of the marketing design put out through King's, which I highly recommend, we'll talk about it later. Generative AI in higher education and it was FutureLearn, isn't it? Yeah, FutureLearn were great about letting us send a survey out to all of those, the thousands, millions of participants.
10,000 now.
Yeah.
Fewer there, yeah.
Of that course. So we're going broader than that. These are anonymised. So we're kind of, when we're looking at the data analysis, it is combined between largely 2 institutions, but also spreading out there as well. To supplement that, we also had some focus groups at my university to give us a little bit more of that sort of textual detail. And I'm going to hand over to Martin, but you can see the first things we've got here. These are adjectives. It might be worth reading them out for people at the back who are short-sighted. But we were talking very much about how people feel.
So I'm just going to go back to that. The perceived usefulness thing was our starting point for this, because perception, it seems to be everything in this space. And it's been really interesting talking to people, as I have now the last couple of years, being involved in this, about, what do you think of this? And you've just got the most extreme views, rather than there being a sort of standard deviation, nice bell curve with most people unsure and in the middle. You've got people over here evangelizing, this is the best thing ever, it's changed my life, it's going to change the world, everything's going to be great, sunny uplands, look at the sky, isn't it gorgeous? And the other people down here, it's the end of university, it's the end of humanity, robots with lasers are going to kill us all. And how do you square that when you're responsible for bringing people together and helping people make informed choices and informed decisions about all of this? So our starting point was to offer people 30 adjectives to choose from. And these are the top scoring adjectives across the 148 responses to the survey. And what's really interesting is that you don't get the extreme views. And is it because these are people who are engaged with the conversation and are not arms folded at the back of the room saying, I don't want to know, I'm burying my head in the sand. This isn't how we do literature. This isn't how we do history. This isn't how we do academic work and all of that. So maybe they self-selected themselves out. But anyway, you've got the top one was intrigued, which is good, cautious, which is good, curious, enthusiastic, hopeful, and optimistic. Actually quite surprising, but maybe skewed by, as I say, the kind of people that are willing to engage in this space. But it did give me a little bit of hope, and it gave me a little bit of a relief sensation in my own mindset. But nevertheless, we cannot neglect and ignore the fact that there are people over there who are absolutely adamant that we are going to burn down the planet and that we're going to destroy everything, and that we've ruined art and we've ruined creativity and we've ruined education. I think not, but I think that in order to get to a position where we are not doing those things, we have to move beyond the liminal space we're in at the moment and help people understand good utility, good function. But how do you grow that? How do you grow that, that sort of self-efficacy, depth of understanding in such a climate? And some of the things that have been coming out of both the surveys and the focus groups have been really interesting, reassuring, steered both of us, I think it's fair to say, towards certain approaches and away from others. So first of all, the first thing you can see here is around the idea of self-efficacy, and the huge variation in confidence is really, really interesting. We have staff who assume students are immersed in this and will understand it, but student research shows that there is that similar profile of lack of confidence and uncertainty, not only about how to do things, but what they're allowed to do and what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. And in addition to that, we've got various other key findings in this realm. We're going to come back to the training impact in a moment, so I won't talk about that now. But what's really interesting is the competing perspectives on what people are doing with these things. So staff are using these technologies for content creation, exploring ways to enhance feedback to students, looking at opportunities to labour save by creating single best answers or multi-choice quizzes. Thinking, though, themselves, they're finding utility, many of those staff, that students are using it to cheat. So this sort of assumption that because you can do some of the things that were described in the previous presentations, that students will. And actually, the research we're finding is that students are not actually using it in this way, at least in the self-declared use. Although there's inappropriate use from all corners because nobody really fully understands. And that's where we need to get to. The development need is absolutely clear on this, coming out of this research, that people want clearer guidance, they want clearer direction, they want training opportunities, all in a landscape where everybody is time poor and precarious, and all of these kinds of things are happening. What's working coming out of the survey and the focus group data is that opportunities to talk, so communities peer learning, those kinds of things are working pretty well. I've just realised I can look at that screen rather than up at that one. You'd never believe I've been teaching for 32 years, would you? Integration with existing academic support, so finding ways to align what people need to other things that are going on, rather than separating it out into a thing of its own. Come to the AI workshop. Well, why don't I go to a pedagogy and assessment workshop where AI is integrated into the kinds of discussions around that? The clarity of institutional guidance is something that is coming out of the research, but is also something that I'm confronted with every single day. So we have on the one hand people saying, look, I work in medicine and the needs of medical students or in medicine are this, X, Y, Z. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to stop this. I want to enable that. And then I talk to historians or social scientists or business people and they say, well, actually, we want the opposite. So how can you do central level guidance that satisfies everybody? So you end up with people saying, you're not telling me enough. And other people are saying, you're telling me too much. So we're leaning into the sense that Shoshi's already mentioned, that existing policy is there and that guidance needs to be in place as a template, offering pathways to localized and nuanced interpretation. And this is really, really quite difficult to achieve, but it's what we're working towards. And the research is reinforcing our drive to do that and to say those things. So the clarity is absolutely clear. The highlighted bit at the bottom there, though, is the one thing that I think is coming through so strongly from our research, and actually has to be said from larger scale projects and other research as well, that hands-on experimentation is the way to go. And this can feel counterintuitive to people who are concerned, as we should all be, about the impact of these new technologies on the environment, for example. Water usage, environmental damage are absolutely massive. And to say the best way to learn is to contribute to that environmental damage. It's problematic and it's difficult, but I don't think you can replace that experimentation. And if you can couple that experimentation with an opportunity for people to find their use, they can then channel and narrow their utilization in much the same way that students introduced a hypothesis, given a scaffold of a particular project, then take that skill and apply it elsewhere where it's applicable. The same thing is happening here. Rather than giving people just blank canvas, go and play, what we're trying to do is to use this intelligence to get people to focus in a particular way on a particular thing with a particular tool, preferably at King's with the approved large language model, which is Copilot, which of course nobody uses because everybody uses ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. But we're trying to go down that path and steer it in that direction. So hands-on experimentation is absolutely key.
Mark, if I can just jump in there
Yeah.
as well, as I just think it kind of tying this together for those of us who are working capacity building around AI, it's really important because of course hands-on experimentation is actual use, which means that that whole intention to use, perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness has to be in place for what we have identified and what's been identified for us as the kind of a major determinant in good use and in people thriving in this educational space. So it's a challenge for us, but it's a really interesting, we've had a really interesting finding in understanding how we should be approaching our jobs in building capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So here are some of the things that, common barriers. You will be familiar with these if you're involved in this or any kind of change initiative or development initiative work. Anxiety is a really visible manifestation in our research and in our everyday working lives. I think it's fair to say. Accepting that people will be anxious, acknowledging the anxiety, giving people space to express things that might actually run counter to what you want to achieve is really important because there isn't unanimity of thought. There isn't consensus. But at the same time, finding ways not to have the same conversation at the beginning of every single session, I think is also important. So putting caveats in place. We have resources that discuss the copyright issue, the data privacy issue, the environmental damage issue, the control of these technologies issue, the inequities issues, all of these, we have these resources. I want to focus today on this one narrow thing. So I'm finding that really useful way of leaning in there. This idea about assessment being a key problem area is absolutely fundamental. It's the lens through which a lot of people are looking at AI, particularly if they're seeing it as a threat. So finding ways to offer solutions and possibilities in the assessment space, I think, is essential. And then this, what the heck do you do about that? You know, time constraints. What can you do?
For the benefit of the online audience, what do you point to?
I'm pointing to time constraints for training. Yes, sorry. Yeah, apologies, people online. So I think that there's an absolute necessity in making space and making time for this, whilst also acknowledging that things are changing really, really, really fast. So we can't expect everybody to be up to speed. There's a website called There's an AI for that. And when I first started using it about 12 months ago, I think there were 11,000 AI tools on there. There's 30,000 on there now. And when the AI bubble bursts and everybody says, yeah, see, I told you so, we will end up with a rationalization and a consolidation that will be beneficial for some, but largely it will be beneficial, I think, for the big tech companies. And that whether that is a good thing or not is up to you. But having these discussions is what's important. Giving people a sense of the lie of the land is what's important. So these are some of the things that we're recommending, that you have clarity at an institutional level, that we provide some kind of structure to the training offer and diversity, but room for play, room for peer review, room for discussion and dialogue, room for experimentation in context, room for people to find a way to take what they've learned and apply it in a situation or a context that's useful and suitable for them. Giving them enough knowledge, foundational knowledge about issues and skills to be able to make an informed decision. Because at the moment, too many people are making ill-informed decisions or refusing to make decisions because they don't know enough. And I think that that's key. The sustainability aspect is important. You can see that for yourself there. There's a lot of work going on by enthusiastic individual members of staff, but not so much that would develop skills in the round. So we need to find a way of moving on beyond the willing, the engaged, the compulsive fiddlers like me, to something that is more suited to a wider context. Ethan Mollick, in his recent book, Co-Intelligence, said, playing with AI is ultimately serious. I think that I could not agree more with this. He talks about two basic threads in the book. One is about the importance of play and experimentation. Another is about the importance of always keeping the human in the loop. And I think that both of those messages are really clear. The final thing that we want to say here really is that by exploring this, we took the opportunity to practice as we were preaching. And we tried to weave AI utilization into all stages of the research process. So initial documentation. So our research proposal, which Shoshi wrote from scratch, the ethics proposal, which I wrote, and then the information sheet, which we co-authored. We had different titles for things. We put them into an LLM, spot the inconsistencies. It did a much better job than if I'd given it to a research assistant, because it was immediate and it was great and it enabled some consistency. What a great use case we found. And then so on through here, we have been quite surprised and amazed, shocked. You might be horrified by some of this, but concept checking the survey questions, initial coding, saved weeks. Unbelievable stuff, using a project or a custom GPT in Claude to code the initial data across those 148 responses on each of those 10 questions has been remarkable. I mean, genuinely, really massive time saver. Sorting and sifting data, exploring things in the literature. Ophelia's done some amazing work there. Transcription, of course, is something that many of us use routinely. That's an AI technology as well. And even stages for drafting of the article that we're hoping to publish soon. So we're seeing it. We're trying to practice as we preach. We're trying to work out where the limitations and problems are. And we're manifesting, I suppose, some of the things that people have been saying. Shoshi mentioned the course that we developed kindly, Go to Future Learn, Generative AI in Higher Education Search. You can see that it's popular, and actually it's nearly coming to its conclusion because we're replacing it with an AI in education course that's being released on May the 5th. But if you sign up for this one, you get free access for 2 weeks, and then you'll be notified when the new one is released, which you'll get free access for 3 weeks if you're not part of a Future Learn Campus institution. If you are, you get it free forever. So that's our contribution there. I know that we've run out of time. Shoshi, did you want to say any final words? Those are our contact details if you want to find out more, but that's what we came to talk about.
Okay.